All right, everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. You know how sometimes you're driving along, everything seems fine, and then suddenly your engine starts acting weird? Like
Yeah.
maybe it stumbles a bit when you're idling, or you feel a little jerk when you accelerate, or
Yeah.
worst case scenario, that check engine light pops up on your dash.
Ugh, I hate that.
It's super frustrating, right?
Sure.
Well, it turns out a lot of times the root of these problems is a tiny little component that most people probably don't even think about: the ignition coil.
Absolutely.
And today we are going to really get into why ignition coils are so important and why it's a really smart idea to replace them as a complete set, especially with high quality options like the ones offered by Walker products.
That's exactly what we're going to do. Today's deep dive is all about ignition coils,
Yeah.
what they do, why they matter, and why replacing them all at once, especially with Walker Products ignition coil sets, is a game changer for your vehicle's performance and reliability.
Right. And to really get into this, we've got a ton of great information to share with you. We'll be digging into the details of ThunderSparky ignition coils and coil sets, looking at Walker Products' overall ignition coil program, watching a super informative Walker Products YouTube video that explains the benefits of coil sets, and we'll even get into some technical documents that break down how these things work, how they fail, and why replacing them all together is the best approach for you.
We're going to take all of that information and break it down into what's really important for you so you can understand this crucial part of your vehicle and make smart choices about its maintenance.
Exactly. We want to help you avoid those frustrating problems and keep your engine running smoothly. So without further ado, let's jump right in. First things first,
Mhm.
what exactly is an ignition coil? I mean, if you're not a car expert, what does it actually do in your engine?
Well, you can think of the ignition coil like a mini power booster for your car's electrical system.
Like a tiny transformer.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
tiny but mighty transformer.
Okay.
See, your car runs on a 12-volt system, but to ignite the fuel and air mixture in your engine to actually make it go smell, you need a much, much higher voltage.
So it needs more power to make the spark.
That's right. The ignition coil takes that 12 volts and steps it up to something like 25,000 to 30,000 volts.
Whoa.
It's a huge jump.
So what happens to all that extra voltage? How does it actually get to the engine and make it run?
Well, that high voltage then travels to the spark plug.
Hmm.
Sometimes it goes directly through a coil boot that's right on top of the spark plug.
Okay.
And in older systems, it goes through ignition wires. Either way, when that high voltage reaches the spark plug, it creates a spark across a small gap.
Yay.
And that spark ignites the fuel and air mix in the cylinder. Boom.
Hmm.
And that's what ultimately powers your vehicle.
So each little spark is like a mini explosion.
Pretty much.
That's pretty cool. So it sounds like ignition coils are a pretty essential part of the whole combustion process.
Yeah, they are.
Now, Walker Products offers a lot of different types of ignition coils. Can you give us a quick overview of the main ones we might find in our cars?
Sure. Walker Products has a super comprehensive ignition coil program. They pretty much cover every vehicle out there.
Wow.
You'll find a few main types. There are ignition coil packs, which are often a single unit that services multiple cylinders. Then you have coil on plug or cop ignition coils.
Makes sense.
And those are exactly what they sound like. Each spark plug gets its own dedicated coil.
Got it.
Then there are pencil ignition coils, which are like a smaller version of the cop design, often used in smaller engines.
So they save space.
Yeah.
Okay.
And finally, cassette ignition coils are usually a larger unit with multiple coils inside that work together to power several cylinders.
So the main difference is how many cylinders they're firing.
Exactly.
Now, Walker Products doesn't just cover the newest car models, right? They actually support cars going pretty far back.
Yeah, you're right. Walker Products vehicle coverage is really impressive. They have coils for vehicles dating all the way back to 1960, all the way up to the present.
That's crazy.
I know, right?
So it doesn't matter if you have a classic car or a brand new one, they probably have you covered.
Yeah, chances are they do. And it's not just American cars either. They cover imports from all over the world.
Wow.
And they support all kinds of engine types, from rotary engines and 3-cylinder engines to big, powerful 12-cylinder engines.
It's pretty amazing that they can cover so many different types of vehicles and engines.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Now, given all the high voltage and all the heat under the hood, it makes sense that these coils don't last forever.
Right.
What are some of the most common reasons that ignition coils fail?
Well, one of the biggest culprits is voltage overload.
Hmm.
This often happens when spark plugs get worn out, or if there's damage to the wires that connect the coil to the plugs.
So the coil has to work harder to create the spark.
Exactly. If the spark plug gap is too wide because of wear, Or if the wires have too much resistance, the coil has to pump out more voltage to get the job done. And that extra strain can damage the coil over time.
Okay, so it's like pushing it past its limits.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
What else can cause them to fail?
Another big factor is the environment under the hood.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tough place for any component to survive.
Yeah, it gets hot down there.
It does. And ignition coils are constantly exposed to these big swings in temperature. From super hot when the engine's running to really cold when it's sitting overnight.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
And all those temperature changes, plus the constant vibrations from the engine, can really mess with the coil's internal parts.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, they can degrade the wiring and the insulation inside the coil. And that can lead to all sorts of problems.
So it's like wear and tear from just being in that tough environment.
Exactly. And on top of that, like any other part in your car, ignition coils just wear out with age. They have a limited lifespan.
Makes sense. Now, let's say an ignition coil starts to go bad. What are some of the signs that you might notice as a driver?
Well, one of the most obvious signs is engine misfires or a rough idle.
Okay.
You might feel the engine shaking or stuttering, especially when you're idling or driving at low speeds.
Yeah, you can definitely feel that sometimes.
Another sign is trouble starting the engine. If a coil fails completely, the engine might not be able to fire at all, and you just won't be able to start your car.
Ugh, that's the worst. And of course, the dreaded check engine light.
Yes, that's always a possibility.
So what are some of the less obvious signs?
You might hear backfiring, which is like a popping or banging sound coming from your exhaust.
Okay.
You might also have trouble starting the engine.
Hmm.
Like it takes longer than usual to crank over.
Okay.
You could also notice loss of power when you accelerate, or even worse, fuel economy.
Right.
All of these can be tied back to a failing ignition coil.
So if your car isn't running as smoothly as it used to, it could be an ignition coil problem.
It's definitely something to consider.
Now, let's say you figure out that you have a bad ignition coil. It seems like the easy fix would be to just replace that one coil and be done with it,
Yeah,
right?
it seems that way.
It feels like the quickest and cheapest option.
Right.
But our sources really emphasize that this might not be the best approach in the long run. Why is that?
Well, replacing only one coil can actually cause more problems down the road. One big issue is that it can create an imbalance in how power is delivered to your cylinders.
Okay.
If you have one brand new coil working perfectly and the rest are older and maybe getting weaker, it's not going to be a smooth and even power delivery.
So it's like one cylinder is working harder than the others?
Sort of. And that imbalance can lead to a bunch of issues. You might get reduced fuel efficiency because some cylinders aren't burning fuel as efficiently as they should.
Oh, wow.
You could also have problems with acceleration. Your car might not feel as responsive when you step on the gas pedal. And what's really wild is that some cars, especially import brands like BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen, have really sophisticated engine computers.
Right.
And those computers can actually detect this imbalance in the ignition system.
They're that smart.
Yeah. And if they sense that something's off, they can trigger the check engine light again. So you might end up back at the mechanic spending even more money to figure out what's wrong.
So replacing just one coil seems like a quick fix, but it could actually backfire and lead to more problems and more expenses down the road.
Exactly.
It's like a Band-Aid solution that doesn't really address the root of the problem.
It is. And think about it this way. All of your ignition coils have been in your car for roughly the same amount of time.
Right.
They've all been exposed to the same heat and vibrations.
Yeah, they've all been through the same wear and tear.
Right. So if one coil fails, it's a pretty good sign that the others are getting close to failing too.
Okay, I see.
You might start experiencing misfires in other cylinders pretty soon after replacing just one, and then you're back to square one.
So the better approach is to replace all of the coils at the same time, right?
Absolutely. And Walker Products offers these convenient ignition coil sets, which make that super easy.
Okay, so why is replacing all the coils at once with a set like this a better solution?
Well, first of all, it ensures that all of your cylinders are firing evenly.
Right.
You get a nice, strong start in every cylinder, which means your engine will run more smoothly. You'll get better acceleration and better fuel economy because all the fuel is being burned efficiently.
It's like starting fresh with a whole new ignition system.
Exactly. And as we said before, when one coil fails, the others are probably not far behind. So replacing them all at once Helps you avoid those potential future breakdowns and those annoying trips back to the mechanic.
Right, so it's a preventative approach. It's better to fix the problem before it becomes a bigger problem.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about these ThunderSparky ignition coil sets from Walker Products.
You're right.
What makes them a good choice for car owners? What are some of the benefits?
Well, Walker Products designs these coil sets with a focus on quality and reliability.
Okay.
They use what's called OE grade construction.
What does that mean?
It means they use premium materials that meet or exceed the standards set by the original equipment manufacturers.
So they're built to last.
They are. And it's not just about the materials, they also pay close attention to how the coils are actually made.
Right.
They use precision wound primary and secondary windings.
Okay.
And that helps ensure a strong, consistent spark and efficient combustion.
So they're well designed on the inside.
They are. Another cool feature is that they use high-temperature epoxy potting.
What's that?
It's basically a process where they encase the internal components in a special epoxy that protects them from heat and vibration.
Oh, so it's like extra protection for the delicate parts.
Exactly. And they also have corrosion-resistant terminals and connectors.
Smart.
Yeah, it helps prevent those electrical connections from corroding and causing misfires.
So they've really thought of everything to make these coils as durable as possible.
They have. And to make things even easier, they're designed as a direct-fit plug-and-play solution.
What does that mean for the average car owner?
It means they're super easy to install, they fit perfectly, and you don't need any special tools or modifications.
Ah, so it's a simple swap.
Pretty much.
And these coil sets cover a wide range of vehicles, right?
Oh, yeah. Walker Products has a huge range of coil sets for both domestic and import vehicles.
So it doesn't matter what kind of car you drive, they probably have a set for you.
Yeah, there's a good chance they do. And they offer sets with the exact number of coils you need for your specific engine.
That's awesome.
And some of their sets even go above and beyond, using premium materials like German copper for the windings, improved thermoplastic connectors, and silicone rubber boots for even better heat resistance.
Wow.
So you're getting a really high-quality product.
So if someone decides to go with a Walker Products ignition coil set, what kind of real-world benefits can they expect to see in their car?
Well, the most noticeable benefit is going to be improved engine performance. With a fresh set of coils, you'll get a smoother idle, better acceleration, and a more responsive engine overall.
That's great.
And as we talked about before, you'll probably see an improvement in fuel economy too. Because the engine is burning fuel more efficiently, you won't have to fill up your tank as often.
And that's good for the environment too, right?
Absolutely. More efficient combustion also means fewer harmful emissions.
So it's a win-win.
It is.
Now, is replacing ignition coils a DIY project, or is it something you should leave to a professional?
Well, the direct fit plug-and-play design makes it pretty easy to install these coil sets.
Okay.
So if you're comfortable doing some basic car maintenance, you could probably handle it yourself.
But if not, it's not a big deal for a mechanic to do.
Right. It's a pretty straightforward job for them.
So who would you say benefits the most from using these Walker Products ignition coil sets?
Well, fleet managers who oversee a lot of vehicles would definitely see a huge benefit.
Okay.
By using these coil sets, they can minimize downtime and keep their fleet running reliably.
Makes sense.
And of course, DIYers who like to work on their own cars can save money and get the satisfaction of doing it themselves.
Yeah, that's always a good feeling.
Yeah. And for professional mechanics, these coil sets offer a high-quality, reliable solution that they can stand behind. It's a win-win for everyone.
So what's the main takeaway here? What do we really want people to understand about their car's ignition coils?
The key thing to remember is that your ignition coils are super important for your engine to run properly.
Okay.
And even though replacing just one failed coil might seem like the easiest solution, it can actually lead to more problems down the line.
Right.
So the smarter approach is to replace all of them at the same time with a high-quality set, like those from Walker Products.
It's an investment in the health of your engine and your own peace of mind.
Exactly.
So what should our listeners do if they think they might have an issue with their ignition coils?
Well, if you're noticing things like engine misfires, a rough idle, or the check engine light is on, it's a good idea to have your car checked out by a mechanic. And when it comes time to replace those coils, definitely consider replacing all of them with a complete set from Walker Products. You can find their products on their website, walkerproducts.com.
That's great advice. And to wrap things up, here's a final thought. Since ignition coils are so important and they tend to wear out over time, isn't it smarter to be proactive and replace them all at once with a high-quality set? It just might save you a lot of headaches in the long run.
I think so.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure.